This happened about 10 years ago, almost to the date exactly. Now, I was working as a park ranger at the time and stationed in one of the cabins not far from the site. I actually really enjoyed being in this cabin and I actually have fond memories and really good times of being there. But one particular event has really stuck with me since then, and it's something that I've never been able to get out of my head since. Let me explain. While being stationed there, like I said, I had a good time, and usually we'd have some cabin buddies, which are other rangers who'd also be staying up there. It was just more convenient than going all the way back into town, especially when you had to work relatively later into the evenings. Now, to be truthfully honest, I was often scared of doing the night work because you can't really tell what's out there, and it can make normal situations much more dangerous than what they should be. Now, every so often I'd have to do general patrols and make sure that no hikers were still around past the closing times. Now, on the first day that I had to do so, everything was normal. When I get through the most dense part of the forest with my flashlight and I notice one more person, I turn off my light not to blind them, and they're pretty much just standing there dead in the middle of the trail. I say to them, "Hey, you can't actually be there," and they don't react. I say, "Hey, you've got to get out of here, the trail's about to close." And it sounds almost like they've agreed, saying something that I can't really hear, but I just know that I'm gonna check back again pretty soon and they should be gone, so I turn around. Now, I could never make out too much of a face or anything, but I know that this person's quite tall, and I don't know, something about how stern the way they were standing there not moving kind of scared me. Now, I continue the rest of the search that I need to do for other hikers who haven't got out of there, and I go past the parking lot or area and I realise that no other cars are there, so they're probably gone now. I decide to do my final check and make sure this person is gone, and I go to that area and I can't see anyone. Now, one thing that was weird is I can see some shoes there. They don't look like they're very new, and they don't seem suited for the environment. They almost look like dress shoes, but very dated ones, and I think this is bizarre. I decide to collect them, and I go put them under a tree. We actually didn't have much space to keep people's belongings, and we can't keep everything for everyone, so if anyone wants to mention it, that's the reason why. So yeah, I still know where they were, and they'd be out of the elements, so that should be fine. I complete my search and I realise that all of the hikers have now gone home, and I'm quite happy about this, and I sip my coffee. I actually had decaf coffee because even though I had to stay up late, I didn't want to wreck my sleeping pattern. If you do night work like this, it can actually be really easy to use caffeine to completely switch your circadian rhythm, but this was something that I wasn't trying to do at the time, so after enjoying my decaf, I ended up falling asleep. Now, I didn't fall asleep for too long, and I'm actually awoken by some sound outside. I had my ranger buddy with me there, so I felt a bit more safe than normal, and my friend's already up and looking out the door. He says, "That's odd. I could have swore that I heard you saying something, but when I checked you were sound asleep." I say, "Yeah, I was. What do you mean? Was I sleep talking?" He says, No. I heard something outside, and I don't know, it's pretty odd." I say, "Let's have a look then," and we both get up and investigate with our torches. All we can hear when we get outside, however, is the sounds of lots of different crickets and other insects, and I immediately get bit and decide to head in again. Now, this is pretty weird. I haven't experienced anything like this before, and I decide that we should just go back in again. I'm actually quite nervous because I haven't really sleep spoke before, so I know that something's definitely wrong. We ended up putting it down to just my friend imagining it, but he's pretty convinced that we definitely heard something. We decide that we should just get a good night's sleep and try and forget about it, and things are normal for the next couple of days. Eventually my cabin buddy has to leave, so it's just me on my own, but I actually don't mind that. Sometimes I like the privacy of it, and just being out there alone can feel quite nice at times, and I set about my usual day. Now, there's a really nice mist that's formed, and the nature looks especially nice today. There's not really too much for most of this day, and I actually have a normal coffee because I'm not far being let off this shift and onto a normal one, and I'm quite grateful for this. The rain does pick up in the day, and it makes the train a lot worse, which is no issue really. One thing I notice is that when it rains there's a lot less people out than normal, so it's actually a lot easier for us to do our work, and sometimes the plants and things can smell nicer in the rain. So I head in again and get ready for the night. My shift is over now and I'm just relaxing really. I was trying to read a book, but I'm actually struggling a bit. I don't know why, I just couldn't seem to concentrate on the book, and it was almost like my brain just wanted me to do other things, so I put it down and I go and stand just outside of the cabin. All of the other cabins around me are empty now, so I just stargaze for a little bit. Now while stargazing, I feel an insect tap my neck. It's almost like it flew into me, flew off, flew into me, and then flew off again like it was taking bites out of me, but it felt pretty strong. I think this is annoying, and I slap my neck only to hurt myself when I laugh. I then head back in again. I do think this is odd though, because I've never felt a bite that strong before. Weirdly, inspecting in the mirror, I don't actually see anything on me, and I head back in ready for sleep. Now, as I'm laying in bed, I can hear somebody say something. I say, "What'd you say, bud?" Half expecting it to be my friend there, not realizing that he's left in my dreary state of mind. I then wake up and I can still hear this. It almost sounds like, you know when you're playing a song on your phone and didn't realize and suddenly try and stop it? It was kind of like that. I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying, but there was definitely something in the background, but it sounded like it was coming from a phone, which is really weird. But I didn't have my phone on then. I switched it off to save the battery, and I didn't trust leaving them plugged in overnight. I have an alarm clock too, so I don't need it. I then get up, and I can see something by the window. It looks like a hand trying to come in when I hear 3 distinct taps. And I can see 3 elongated fingers that are a grey-black kind of colour slowly tap on the window with impossibly long nails. Now, I thought it was one of the other rangers just messing with me because he knew I was out here on my own, and I quickly get up and rush to the door and jump out and say surprise. Now, I was surprised to find nobody else there. It almost felt like a ghost had walked through me, and I suddenly feel much smaller. I shine the torch around and can't see anything, and I quickly scan the area, and I realise now that nobody else is there. I bolt back in and slam the door shut, push the blinds down and look out constantly. I had saw something and heard it tap on the window 3 times, and that freaks me the heck out. I then realised too that this must have been the exact same force as when I thought I felt that thing tap in my neck. Now maybe that was the same thing. I then realised that maybe there's something on the roof, and every so often I can hear creaking sounds. I go to venture out bravely to investigate this, and I hear what sounds like a cat fighting on the roof, but it's a much different sound from a normal cat. It's much deeper and more scary, to be honest. I ran outside and sprint over to the next cabin, which I have the key in, and then shine the light around towards the roof but can't see anything. I then slam the door behind myself and cower into the toilet, barricading myself in. Stupidly, I left my radio and other equipment I needed in the other cabin, but that's fine, I felt safer in this one. The walls are a bit thicker and it hasn't really got many windows and they're all well covered. I probably stayed in there cowered into the corner for probably 2 or 3 hours until eventually I drifted off. Upon waking, initially, I didn't remember what had happened the previous night. I think it might have been from the adrenaline making me especially tired, but I found myself leaving the cabin and realising what had happened the night before. as I come outside and close the door behind me, I realise something's very odd. There's 3 distinctive scratch marks on the cabin door, and you can tell that they're fresh. They're probably about an inch or so in diameter, and clearly made from some kind of animal, but this definitely wasn't a bear. I quickly gather my things and check out off of the shift. There was nobody covering me because I was the only person staying there, so I didn't have to warn anybody about what happened, but to be truthfully honest, this experience 10 years ago still haunts me. The thing that I really don't like is that I can't tell for certain whether it was an insect biting me or something touching my neck, or what actually happened to me that day. Maybe it's some kind of weird worm or something, but I don't know. It almost looked like some kind of creature's hands were tapping on the window trying to get my attention. The sounds I heard on the roof could have been any animal, but I don't know. Now, this was before the DNR was forced to admit to the release of cougars in the state to control the deer population. We were fishing, myself, husband, 6-year-old and 3-year-old, and kept hearing rustling behind us about 20 yards. Told husband that I thought I heard a low growl. Of course he hadn't, so it was all in my head. Fast forward an hour to when we're packing up our gear to leave and he hears a growl finally. Looks at me terrified because it was close and we're a good half a mile or more from the car. Now I figure out very quickly how to get 2 kids into a single stroller. I walk closer to the river, husband between us and woods, both adults terrified the whole time. Kids thinking it's fun to ride together, get everybody to the car and flip on the lights before starting the car, only to see a cougar turn and sprint back into the woods again. Now this happened when I was about 15, 6 or 7 years ago, when I finally grew old enough to become a counsellor at a summer camp I had attended annually for most of my childhood. The camp is in Camo Anchorage in Plymouth, Wisconsin if you want to check it out. You would imagine that a summer camp as large and old as this would have its fair share of scary stories and camp legends, but from my experience that wasn't really the case. Ghost stories around the campfire were of course popular, but there weren't really any specific ones about the camp itself, that is, except for one commonly accepted notion among the staff: Thunderbird Cabin 2 is haunted. See, the camp is separated into a boys and girls side. All these sides are further divided into sections, with names like Lakeview, Timber Trail, or of course, Thunderbird. Counsellors would rotate through sections throughout the summer. During this particular week of this story, I was stationed in Thunderbird and was assigned with another counsellor. Now for this we'll just give him a different name. Now Keegan, to watch over the infamous Cabin 2. Stories about the cabin varied. Entities outside of the window, goatmen, scratching and strange sounds at odd hours of the night, whatever. The diverse and often hyperbolized nature of these stories actually led me to doubt some of the legitimacy of them all. It's much more likely that there was logical explanations to these, but who come up with Thunderbird 2 being haunted in the first place anyway? But yeah, I do not believe in ghosts or paranormal, but I know my experience doesn't really have much logic from where I'm thinking. Anyway, it goes like this. This week, I was assigned to watch the 2 youngest groups of boys, about 6 to 8. We like to have everybody in bed early since the young kids can be restless, and they need time to wind down. This particular night, things went smoothly for Keegan and I, who had gotten all of the kids seemingly asleep rather quickly. Being a little bit older, we would stay up or chat or read, and this night was no different. We both sat in Keegan's bunk, sharing a pair of earbuds and watching videos. It's important to describe to you the layout of the cabin. They were simplistic, rectangular, raised wood cabins. The inner perimeter is kind of lined with bunk beds and housed about 20 to 30 campers and 2 counsellors. Small, high-set rectangular windows along the sides provide moderate light at night from the moon. Anyway, we're watching a video and all of the kids are asleep. It's dead quiet inside. You can barely hear the crackling of the dwindling campfire outside and the muffled normal sounds of the Midwest forest at night. That is, until something disturbs the peace. The unmistakable sound of somebody shaking in the sleeping bag breaks the silence. It's clear from the noise and the vibrations that one of the campers is basically flailing in their bunk. Their sleeping bag is rustling. The metal bunk is squeaking and the sound of their body bouncing on the mattress makes a dull thumping. Keegan and I quickly take out the earbuds and pause for a moment to listen. We both then look at each other, and I'm actually worried that someone's having a seizure maybe. And then on the other side of the cabin we hear the same noise, the same vibration, only this time it's only a few seconds after the first camper starts to shake, a second one does, then another and another. Within 7 or 8 seconds, literally, every kid in there is flailing in their bags. The sound of rustling fabric is really all you can hear. In the pale moonlight, you could also see the outlines of their bodies bouncing a little, and basically the entire cabin is vibrating at this point. Keegan and I are frozen, wide-eyed, terrified. We each have the same frightened look. It's clear that neither of us have any idea what's going on or what to do, so we sit there paralysed. Some time now passes and we're collectively trying to figure out what's going on. Another 20 or 30 seconds after this, it stops like a light has switched. All of the campers stop moving and go perfectly still, back to sleep undisturbed. Still immobilised with fear, Keegan and I sit completely still, not talking or moving, scared. I'm assuming this was simply the beginning of something worse. Unsure whether to run to check the campers, minutes go by. Both of us looking around, eyes darting to the door, the surrounding bunks, and both of us braced for the impending doom. I'm not sure how, but at the same time, both of us silently conclude that we should bolt. As fast as we can, we leap from the bunk and sprint to the door, into the clearing of the accompanying cabins. The only person still outside is our senior counsellor scrolling on his phone by the campfire. He's surprised to see us both dash out of the cabin the way that we did. Panicking, we try and explain what the heck just happened, but he brushes it off, but agrees to check the cabin. And you can guess, he doesn't see or hear anything but peacefully sleeping campers. We then reluctantly return to the cabins and get in our bed, still on very high alert. I lay awake for some time, braced and waiting for something, but alas, I drift off at some point. Now you wouldn't believe it. In the morning, none of the kids claimed to know anything about what happened the previous night. They all claim to have fallen asleep like any other night, and the phenomenon doesn't continue any other night. As someone who is wholly skeptic, and as previously stated doesn't believe in anything other than well-sounded scientific observations, I struggle to think of what could have caused this. I want to think it was a prank, but I just don't think they could have coordinated it so well like that, and why wouldn't they be laughing or saying anything the next day? Now I really don't know what to think of this. Now, in my experience, the creepiest thing that you can see out on the trail is a sketchy person or drifter. Now, I was on a weekend hike with a friend and we come across a man standing just off the trail staring at us as we approached. I offered him a greeting. Don't remember exactly what I said, no I suppose. He had cold eyes and was generally giving us the spooks. We were pretty far out from the nearest town and he had zero hiking gear, normal clothes that looked clean enough. We passed him and kept trudging on up the trail. Now, I glanced back over my pack and the guy literally turned, walked into the brush and just vanished. We then stopped hiking in that area ever again. Now, I had a weird experience about a year and a half ago out in Colorado. Now, this was while hiking up a steep ridgeline, and my friend suddenly grabbed me and put a finger up over his mouth, signifying to be quiet. I looked over the left side of the trail, and about 50 yards away, there was a large white wolf. We stood there still for about 5 minutes while it walks away in the opposite direction. I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but we slept in the car the night before at the trailhead, and I remembered that we heard some odd sounds the night before, very close to the car and actually growling. We slept in the car with all the windows down, and I remembered it kind of freaked me out a bit. Now, it wasn't necessarily creepy, but really a surreal incident that spooked the heck out of me, and I'm just grateful that we had the car to sleep in. Now, when I was pretty new to hunting, my brother and I were up in this sort of open-ended, horseshoe-shaped canyon up in the mountains hunting elks with bows. Joe Rogan. We both had radios so we could talk to each other. Right around the bottom of the horseshoe, the foliage opened up and I could see my brother right down below me, about 100 yards down the canyon. I kept an eye on him so I could match his pace and kept walking forward when I saw something exit in the foliage that he had just exited. Now, I didn't have any binoculars, but I do actually have my rangefinder, which has a small zoomed-in ability. I take it out and look at the thing, and there's a cougar down in a stalking distance following my brother. I got on the radio and tell him not to move, telling him that there's a cougar that's following us, so he just stops dead in his tracks. He didn't even try and use the radio. I felt like I was watching the thing forever before it turned around and left. It's terrifying that those things are so silent. Like, it was so quiet up on the mountain. All you hear is footsteps in the snow and maybe a little wind. So much so that my brother actually has no idea that it's behind him. Now, I wanted to write down my own experience because it still freaks me out thinking about it. Now, just down the road from where we live, a few years ago, I had previously lived in Southeast Australia, in the opening into about 100 acres of woodland and brush that I frequently went to when I was younger, and just did normal things like camping and riding, etc. Now, I was out driving at around 11:30 with my girlfriend, as we're in the area, and I decided to show her the woodlands that are there. And she loves everything to do with nature, and it's also summer, so a very warm night. Now, I left my car with the light shining into the trees, as we weren't going too far in, and it was pitch black inside, and the two of us just kind of sat there talking, just, relaxing generally. Now, she was sitting on a sort of map of that area that had been put in some plastic, and I was keeping an eye on the trees as I had a feeling that something was just wrong. I've read on here a few people have said that they have a feeling that they're in danger, although nothing around them can visibly make that happen. Now, every sense was almost reaching out and my adrenaline was up, but there wasn't really anything in my eyeline that seemed any different. After lighting another cigarette to calm my nerves, I scanned the tree line and again realized that it looks different to prior. It was only after starting to look into the dark that I saw there was moonlight now lighting up grass where it couldn't have been before, as there was a black shape blocking it, which I thought was a tree previously. I got goosebumps just typing this, but the only way to describe it was everything was just sound and calm, now suddenly dead silent a few seconds later. This disgusting feeling of dread washes over me, and I saw emotion in the dark to the path as this thing crawls on all fours. Now, I've seen pretty much every animal that lives in the outback, and we don't have large predators like in the US or Europe, so somehow I knew this thing was a predator, and it wasn't hiding itself from us, instead slowly coming towards us. I don't know if my girlfriend saw it at night, but I couldn't look away. But just as it reaches the line, my car lights are able to illuminate it and it rears up on two legs and just sat there staring at us. I'm 6'4", and this thing was about a meter larger than me, with arms that are far too long for it, that could have reached near the ground. And it was weird how it was kind of white but almost yellowish, with the dim light just about making out the silhouette of its head of a dog or wolf. I wasn't able to move as it stared at me, but it's now my girlfriend gasps. She's clearly seen what I have seen. And whatever I was staring at seems to prevent me from thinking logically. I grab her by the arm and sprinted to my car, slamming the doors and tore out of there as fast as I can, both of us too scared to speak until about half an hour later. We both discussed it many times, and the feeling that we had is what I imagine is what a rabbit feels when it sees a wolf or fox staring at it. Neither of us have been able to come up with an explanation as to what this is, and I've never really been able to make any sense of it. Now, I was driving alone in a national park very far from people on a bright full moon night, huge clear moon, the kind that you can honestly read by. The road went straight along to the bottom of a wide, mostly barren valley, then blanketed up and sharply left onto the ridge. It was about 10 PM and I drove through the valley on full alert, watching for animals and loving the scenery in the crazy bright moonlight. When I hit the curve and went into the sharp uphill left, I saw something through my side window. White thing. It was rapidly getting larger in my peripheral vision, as though it had almost been moving parallel to me, but the turn in the road meant that I was now in its path, so I turned my head and looked directly there. It was white, man-shaped, almost naked. It was a deathly nauseating white with a grease shine, completely hairless. It was crawling on its hands and knees, but about half the size of the car. And it was coming so very, very fast. It almost had a rubbery face, distorted by hate or a scream. Black eyes that actually reflect in the moonlight. Now for the look on its face, honestly, I can't even tell you. I can still make myself feel sick from the memory. I believe that it was intelligent, and that it wanted to tear me apart with its teeth. The speed is horrifying. It went from being a small white spot to a spitting distance in a time that it took for me to make the turn. When I unfroze myself and hit the gas, it was on the road and I braced for it to run in front of the car, and then it was gone. The rearview mirror showed me nothing. I have never really told anybody. I have seen a few minor glitchy / ghosty things over the year, but this is the most scary and I don't know what it was. Now I've looked into skinwalkers and Wendigo ideas, and it's a case of almost but not quite. Are any skinwalkers ever seen without skin, and can Wendigos be stocky instead of shiny? Then maybe I am most intrigued by the Massachusetts story. Now, this happened in Newfoundland. Newfoundlanders have no trouble telling ghost stories, and a lot of them believe in fairies, but I've not heard of a creature like this before. As for the bear idea, Newfoundland has only black bears. I've even tried to sell myself it was a badly lost wet polar bear, but the way that I saw it just doesn't make sense in how it was crawling. Now it looked like I was watching a crawling man. I spent a lot of time in that area and encouraged storytelling in the bar, but nothing like this has ever got mentioned. I still don't know what to think of it. Now, I'm somebody who's had the pleasure of working as a park ranger for a number of years. Now, I don't think you can beat a job like this, well that's for me anyway. Just being out in nature alone, getting some of the views that you do, I think really outweighs any of the benefits of most other jobs. Now, like in most jobs, I had my fair share of weird experiences, but from my experience as a ranger, they were mostly positive. In fact, massively outweighing anything negative. I had one or two weird things happen, but nothing too bad that I couldn't really explain. I even had some encounters with wild animals, but that was cool, I guess, in the end. I did have a strange thing that I'd like to share with everybody today, just to get your view on it and ask what you think happened. Now, I wasn't actually on duty on this particular day. I was on a trip with a friend of mine. Now, we're just going on a hiking trip, nothing too out of the ordinary. Now, destination was what my friend supposed were some cool cabins he'd seen before, that apparently people didn't use anymore, but we were welcome to stay in. I never questioned why we were welcome to stay there. I did until a few days before, and he said, well, nobody else uses them. And I should have said no to this idea, but to be honest, I thought it was a pretty cool thing to do. I'd known this friend for a number of years, and we used to train together at the gym. To be honest, he was always late, and it was kind of annoying, but I guess that's just how he is. And funnily enough, before we set out on this adventure, he was late too. But I was kind of expecting it, so actually showed up later than the agreed time that we were going to meet. Now, my friend also likes being in the outdoors, but he hasn't played the game for as long as me, and he's not really as good at it. He's pretty good being outside, but to be honest, he often has to ask me for help. But he can be brave sometimes, and I think that's important, and he has the adventurous spirit in him. So, we set out on the first part of our hike and everything's pretty good. We ended up going quite a long way off the path because we really want to have an adventure here, and even if there might be some danger, we're kind of up for it. Now, we probably hiked out for the first day at a pretty good speed, until eventually my friend got a bit tired. He hasn't really got good cardiovascular fitness, and I could really tell on this part of the journey. Every so often we'd have to stop, and I basically ended up taking some of the load off of him. I don't know, it just made it a little bit easier for what we were doing. Now, as we're walking, everything's normal, and we get to our first camping spot. It's quite a cool area, and nothing's out of the ordinary here. We feel pretty good and relaxed, and we're just sharing stories of funny things that happened in our time. I remembered one really funny thing was a guy that was a little bit weird and another guy that was weird but aggressive sometimes got stuck in the same room together. We don't know how we broke the door, but funnily enough it was on a Friday evening, so it meant if we left them there, nobody probably would have come to rescue them. One of my friends was just sitting there completely calm and normal, just annoyed, and the other one was staring at us through the glass, which we found hilarious. It was a really good college memory, I guess, and one that I cherish, and I wish we'd taken a picture of it. We kept on reminiscing about the old days and just saying what we wanted to do, and my friend said that he wanted to get in some kind of design jobs, but he wasn't sure what, because he was changing lanes. He used to work as an engineer to a degree, but he didn't really enjoy it. You know when people act too rough and broody? He said it was kind of like that constantly, and it just became annoying and gave him a headache, and I told him that I could understand. Now, I'd also worked in similar jobs before, and it used to do my head in a bit, but I don't know, I guess it's each to their own. So we just talked about a number of different things, and my friend also said he wants to get back into training. Now, the thing was, I'd lost a lot of my gym gains at the time from working, so I didn't really know how I felt about starting again, but we're just talking about things like this and having a really grand old time. We eventually fall off to sleep and wake up the next day for the part 2 of the hike. Now, this part of the hike actually takes us into a different terrain. This time, we're going to be walking through somewhere that's got larger trees and I guess just more life around us. It's kind of cool because when we're walking we can see some butterflies and things like that, which really set the tone for a nice hike. Now again, this friend doesn't really know as much as I do, so I'm pretty much leading the way here, just he's given me the general direction of the cabins. He then decides to tell me that there's been reports of weird things happening around those cabins. Apparently, there's some weird people that live around there that you have to be careful of, and animals and things like that, but I don't really believe it too much. Especially doing the job that I do, I know it's very, very rare that you'll meet anybody out in the woods, but most of the times they've just become lost and actually need your help. We're not seeing any aliens or things like that, or ghosts or anything, so I'm pretty confident and just tell my friend to kind of knock it off a bit and stay focused. As we're walking too, my friend constantly tells me that he thinks we're being followed by an animal. I ask him what kind of animal and he says, I don't know. Every so often I kind of see it in the background, but I'm not really sure what it is. I ask him to describe it and he says he can just see a silhouette almost tracing us every so often. And he says that he could have sworn as he fell asleep the previous night, he saw something staring at him with somewhat glowing eyes. I then tell him that this was probably some kind of insect or reflection and not to worry about it too much, and he doesn't worry much. My friend isn't much of a worrier too. He could kind of laugh off anything and I actually enjoyed being around people like that. It just made trips like these a lot more pleasant, to be honest, and it was something that I could enjoy. Now, we continue on our great adventure, and we don't seem to be getting much closer to these cabins. I say, hey, can you put a swimming pool in mine? And my friend says, what? I say, you're going to give me a basketball court soon. My friend then finally catches on that I'm joking with him and just saying that it's all in his head. I didn't believe him. I was completely convinced that we weren't going to find any cabins or anything and that we're just going to be out here and use our tents. That's why I made sure that I brought a really good tent with me. Now, one bizarre thing that I do realise while we're walking is there seems to be quite a big bird around. Every so often, just out of my peripheral vision, I can catch what seems to be quite a large bird flying away every so often, but not making too much noise. You can only really hear it if you notice and stop for a few moments, but I don't know, it just seemed a little weird. I didn't know that there was supposed to be any big birds out here, but maybe it's an eagle or something. So with this in mind, I'm a little bit more observant and I continue walking on. We have quite a lot of forest up ahead of us. We're on quite a nice path, but there is a bit of a drop that leads into some running water next to us, so we have to be careful. I also don't want to hike in the night because I know if we fall down there within seconds you could get carried away by the rapids and probably never seen again. My friend was actually worried of this too, and he told me a couple of times, and I say, yeah, we're gonna get back soon, don't worry about it, buddy. Now, we keep on walking through what seems to be impossibly tall trees and denser forest. It's quite nice, but it's rained recently and it's a bit annoying because every time that we're walking we're getting water on our faces. Also, the path that we're walking on, if you could call it that, is getting narrower and narrower, and it's becoming quite annoying trying to get through to the camping site. I really don't want to have to set up camp randomly, but I can't really see many clearings where we are. I decide that the best option is just to keep on going, and hopefully we're going to find an area that has a flat opening, or somewhere that we can get to that we're not going to be in trouble if we tent into the side of it. After probably another 10 more minutes of walking, we finally come up to a relative clear zone. I start setting up the tent and my friend starts trying to get dinner ready. He's struggling at first and I have to stop and help him, and we agree to switch roles. I eventually get the food on pretty quick and I'm excited to tuck into it. Now, while I'm doing so, I say some joke to my friend and he doesn't reply. I then say it again and I don't hear anything back from him, which I think is pretty odd, and I go over to him. He seems to be locked into one place, almost fixated, and I can't tell exactly what he's looking at. It takes me a couple of seconds and he just points in a direction, and to my amazement, there seems to be the silhouette of something stalking us almost. It's a bit hard to describe, but it's a very dark silhouette just off in the tree line, kind of peering over at us, but I know this isn't possible. There shouldn't be anybody out here. Plus we haven't seen anybody on the whole first day and second of our hike, so this is pretty weird. I go to wave and my friend looks at me like I've just committed an atrocity in front of him. I'm not feeling as scared as he is, but weirdly this figure doesn't move. It looks like quite a tall person, like a man specifically, maybe 6.5 feet tall, wearing a dark black coat, but I can't really see much else. One thing I noticed about this person is that they have very, very broad shoulders, and I thought maybe they had something in there. It almost looked like they were wearing it with a coat hanger. It was that strange. And silently, it slowly turns away and walks back into the forest. Okay, now that's pretty odd. I look at my friend and he nods at me, and we retreat back towards our campsite. I say, hey, don't worry about it. It's probably just another hiker that doesn't want to be seen, or maybe he's hunting or something like that. I stumble on my words, now getting a little bit worried as I hear a twig snap near me. My friend says, hey, we've got to head back, but I say, no, we can't. We're going to have to hike in the dark for literally a day if we do this. Somewhat frustrated, my friend sits down and I say, look, we should probably just keep watch out this night just to make sure nothing happens, but don't worry. I've been in situations like this before with my job, and I know the best thing to do is to remain calm and not panic, and my friend reluctantly agrees. We eventually get ready to sleep and we stay on watch for a couple of hours before getting into the tent. Now, I manage to drift off, then wake up again, hearing some kind of rustling in the trees. I wake up very dazed and probably exhausted from the hike to this point. Maybe not exhausted, but very tired, and I peer out, and I can just about make out some red glowing things in the distance. I put my head down and rub my eyes, but when I look up again, it's gone. I don't really know what this is, and it's pretty confusing, to be honest. I ended up sitting there for another 5 or 10 minutes just trying to make out anything in the inky blackness around me, but all I can see is the stars now as my eyes adjust. Now, a little bit confused, I just put it down to being tired and weary and head back inside my tent. I wake up the next day and my friend doesn't have any idea about any of it. I start saying, hey, did you hear or see anything? And he said, no, I slept like really well, man. Honestly, I felt good. And I say, yeah, right, and decide not to tell him about the thing that I've just seen. I don't want to scare my friend too much, but I've got to admit it to you guys, this is really weird. I kind of know if I see things when I'm tired, because it never happens, so this is weird. Now we pack up our things and continue on the next part of our journey. This should take us into the exact area that the cabins exist in my friend's head are. I can't wait to clown him about it, and I'm constantly making jokes about it. My friend takes it well and starts to joke back with me. We come up to a small bridge which I didn't notice before that looks absolutely ancient, which I think is pretty cool. My friend's too scared to go across it, and I kind of just walk along the edges and make it across. He then does the same as well, but says, hey, do you see that? And I say, what? He then looks at me dead in the face and says, I saw something that doesn't look right. I said, where? He said, it's gone now. I said, for a second, what did you see? And he tells me, well, just ahead of where we're walking, I swear to God, I saw a large I don't know what this thing was, but big tall person wearing some kind of weird cloak or something, just staring at us before walking behind a tree and disappearing. I say, look, we've got to get to the bottom of this, and I say that I'm going to press forward. Now, I didn't really believe my friend again because he's so paranoid that I'm certain this is only existing in his mind. I walk a little bit further ahead and eventually make it to the exact spot that my friend supposed that he saw somebody, and there's absolutely nothing there once again. I just turn around and look at my friend and put my hands up as if to say, well, and he shakes his head and said, God, I must just be dehydrated or something, but I was convinced I saw something. I say, yeah, just don't worry about it, let's just get out of here. And he agrees. I then say, we've got your cabin to look forward to, and he starts to get a bit annoyed. I decide to cut off the jokes and we continue going. Now, I've got to admit, I was feeling a little more unsettled than I was at the start of the trip. I still haven't told my friend about what I'd seen in the night, or at least thought I did, but it was pretty weird. Now, the chances of somebody actually being out here following us is very low, because they'd have to be hiking and camping parallel to us. Now, it's very improbable, but it would mean if it was the case, then we might be in some kind of trouble here. I was starting to get a bit worried, but luckily I had a satellite phone, so if we needed help I could probably radio in for some, or at least report what had happened. Now we make it up to the area where the cabins are, and there's nothing. I then start bursting out laughing, and my friend says, "Why are you laughing? They're literally there." I then say, "Where?" And to my amazement, there are about a set of 5 or 6 cabins that have been abandoned long ago, just off in the distance. Stunned, I then be completely quiet and just laugh at the fact that I didn't see those. I say sorry to my friend and he says, "Yeah, it's fine, it's cool, let's just go over there." Now, I was a little bit underwhelmed because they just look like normal regular old cabins, but my friend seems quite excited at this find. Now, this is meant to be the highlight of our adventure, but I guess it was kind of overshadowed by the weird things that were happening at this point. Now, we eventually make it up towards it, and we're not too far away when I decide to stop and scout out the area. I'm looking around and I can't believe it. There up on one of the hills is someone standing there staring at us, again with very broad shoulders, and this time seeming to be wearing some kind of feathered coat, almost like a grey-black colour. Now, I kid you not, I'm sure I could just about see some kind of glowing red dots around where his face should have been. My friend is just going on about something else and stops, wondering why I'm not replying, and then we both look and stare up in the same area. Now, my friend drops his bottle on the floor and quickly jumps next to me, and whatever this thing is slowly turns away and over the hill. Now at this point I'm getting a bit worried and night's starting to set in, and I haven't really got a good visual on what this thing is. Now I'm pretty sure this is just a lost hiker and we're staring at their headlamp, and this is what I say to my friend, but he has a different theory on it, saying this is something different. Now, I haven't really got the best of eyes, but my friend does, and he's convinced that this isn't a person. I then tell him just to knock it off, and then we realise that night's only a couple of minutes away. The sun is just about setting over the horizon, and we're left with a choice, and that's a single choice, just to set in for the night. My friend then says, "No, we gotta hike out of here," and I say, "Yeah, with that thing out there?" And he kind of silently agrees with me, and he sighs and starts to set up the tent. I say, "No, let's go inside one of these cabins, it's gotta be a lot safer, at least we have a door," and my friend agrees. We both split off and start searching out for a suitable cabin, aka one that hasn't got too many things inside it and at least a closed-in door. And for the first one that I explore, there's nothing there. Just some broken out windows and a broken in door. It's very easy for animals to be in here, and it's obvious that there was some mice or rats or something, because there's little marks around some of the doors, and there's a hole in the wall, and I decide that we're not going to share it with them. They'd probably be sleeping under the thing when we're in it, and I don't want that, even if we've got a tent. And then go over to another cabin, and as I go in there, I have a strange feeling that something's off with this one. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's just a really weird feeling that come over me. Also, something smells off. It doesn't really smell like something died, but it's almost like a unique alien smell that I've never smelled before. It's really difficult to describe, but strong enough that you notice it, but hard to put a finger on, but not a good smell. I quickly leave that cabin. Now, I then hear my friend calling over and he says, "Hey, I think we've got one." I walk over to my buddy and he's found a pretty cool one. It's got the windows and the door closes still, and it doesn't seem as though there's been any animals in here. "Well, this is it. Do you want to sleep outside or in here?" My friend then drops the tent down and starts assembling it, and I begin helping him. While we're doing this, I can't help but constantly look over my shoulder and I tell my friend that I need a break, and I go outside and just stare over at the hill. I'm half expecting that thing to come running down it after us, or that person, but nothing happens. I don't know, it's pretty weird. I stay there for a good 5 minutes, letting my eyes adjust fully to the darkness, but nothing happens. I then turn around and I have a feeling that something's watching me. I look off to another ridgeline and I can just about make out some kind of inky dots slowly going behind the hill, out of sight. It almost looks like when a cat or something's trying not to be seen and ducks down, but I was pretty sure of what I'd seen. Now, I don't want to alert my friend, but I don't know whether this is a dangerous animal, but we should be fine because if we close the cabin door and put some bags against it, nothing's really going to get in here. So I quickly go and help my friend continue assembling the tents. It didn't take long and we've pretty much got that done, and we both sit in there and start to barricade ourselves in, thinking how weird this is. Now, my friend says that we should just go now and set off. I keep telling him, do you know where you're going for a start? Do you know how dangerous it is to night hike? And we're gonna have to do this all night, then hike again in the day, then sleep. And this thing could still be out here, whatever this person is, or whatever it is. My friend then says, yeah, you're right. And we decide to start drinking a little bit. We have some alcohol, and we just wanted some Dutch courage, but we only have a shot or two each, which really isn't that much for us. Now, trying to make light of the situation, my friend pretends that he's really drunk, and I think it's funny, and I do the same. Now, it was all funny until I actually needed to pee and I had to go back out there. Now, I really don't want my friend to realise how scared that I've become, but my god, I did not want to leave that tent. But now I don't really have a choice. I tell my friend that I'm going to pee and ask him to keep guard, and he says, yeah, I will, and I head out. Now, not long after heading out, I have the feeling that I'm being watched once again. I then look over at my buddy, and he zips himself up in the tent, and he's being a coward, which I laugh about and sigh, thinking, yeah, that's some really good backup. After finishing my business, I go back and tell my friend about the weird feeling I've got, and he agrees to come out with me this time. Now, both of us are standing probably 10 feet away from the cabin and just trying to get a good idea of our surroundings and make out exactly what's happening. Now, my friend says, hey, did you hear that? And I say, what? Much louder than him. And then I can hear a strange rattling sound, almost like a rattlesnake mixed with a hiss. It's really weird and it sounds quite far away at first. Now, I stood there absolutely dumbfounded with my friend, trying to make sense of this for another 4 or 5 minutes in complete silence. Now, I know you hear about people saying that they hear silence in weird situations, but this was the opposite. The forest was still alive with sound, and maybe, I don't know, that added to the suspense of the whole thing, but it felt very off. Then, we hear the sound again, followed with 3 distinct clicks, and the sound of movement. This time it was closer than before, but still not enough to cause any panic. I start slowly backing up now, and then get some bravery and say, hey, let's go forward a bit. If this is a person, we don't want them to think we're scared of them and some kind of victim. And we both start to advance now, with my friend next to me. I pick up a rock and so does my friend. Not like it's really going to do much if somebody's armed with a gun or knife, but hey, if I can get a rock in, at least I've done something. Now, again, we hear the sound, just much closer this time, to one of the cabins adjacent to our one. Now, it'd be impossible to know exactly where it was, but I'm sure this thing darted behind one. I could just about make out some kind of glowing eyes again, but much taller than I thought. It looked like these eyes were 7 feet off of the ground, and there it was again. Now, petrified, I can see this thing slowly put its head round the corner. It was almost like staring at a bear, but with eyes that illuminated slightly. Now, this didn't make sense. There wasn't enough moonlight for them to glow like this, so what was this? It kind of looked more like a bird now thinking of it, but it was so odd. Still covered in these feathers, or I don't know what you'd call it, or if this was a person wearing a Halloween costume, or God knows what this is. And I start to slowly advance towards it slightly. I'm very surprised at what I'm seeing, and then again, I can hear a loud thud now, followed by silence. I then start to slowly back up, and funnily enough, my friend's already in the cabin again, and I realise that all of this heroic bravery has been done on my own. My friend says, "Hey, get back in here." And I start to swear at him, but stop, as it breaks my concentration, and I turn around again, trying to see where this person's gone. I then start to slowly step backwards, and I can't see this thing. I manage to make it behind a tree and get into some more cover, and as I peer around it, I can see the eyes glowing back at me from another tree, closer this time. I don't know how much more of this I can bear. There's a little voice in my head that's telling me just stay calm and breathe, and that's what I'm trying my best to do. Now, I'm really worried in this moment, and I really don't know what to think of the situation. I'm still not close enough to the cabin to be safe, and I don't know if I'm safe with this thing, but one thing I do know is when I get back in there, I'm a lot safer. I'm now worried because this thing seemed to move so quick and without making sound that I don't think I can get back in time. I then tell my friend, "You've got to cover me," and he says, "What?" I say, "Just go near the door," and surprisingly he actually does, and I start slowly backing in, and that's when that thing starts moving towards us now. I sprint inside the cabin and my friend slams the door, and what do you know, he pushes it off the hinges. He quickly bolts up though and corrects it again and slams everything we've got behind it trying to fortify it, collapsing next to the door. I duck down and quickly jump up, expecting this thing to be ready for a fight. I don't see anything and slowly go towards the windows. I tell my friend don't move and he agrees that he's not going to. I then start berating him for leaving me out there, but he says I got scared and I say it's fine. I then slowly peer up out the window, half expecting this thing there. I duck down again, too scared to look. Now, I don't know how long I was ducked down for, but it was probably only about 2 minutes before I slowly look up. I don't see anything out my side, then I tell my friend that he's got to check the other window. It's closer to him, and I slowly go over to fortify the door. He then starts shaking and doesn't really move, staying in his spot, and I say, "Please, just do it." My friend starts to stand up and there's a loud knock on another cabin further away, and he bolts down. And then suddenly filled with adrenaline, stand up and look just face to face to the window and see nothing. Now this is bizarre. This thing should have still been chasing us, or maybe it was still out there, so I duck down. Every so often we get the clicking sound further away. This goes on for a good 10 minutes until I let my guard down a bit and start to stand. And then I hear a shuffling outside of the cabin wall. It kind of sounded like somebody was throwing lots of different ping pong balls or cups on the side, but it's really freaking creepy. Again, neither of us know exactly what this person or thing is doing out there, or why it's still there, or for that matter if there's more than one of them, because we were convinced it was getting further away from us, but I guess not. This thing was probably only inches away from us. How thick are the cabin walls? I don't know. I was worried that some kind of insect or termite had bit through it, and that thing was going to punch through us, but all we can do in this situation is fortify our door and hold the position. My buddy starts looking around for anything to use as a weapon, but we don't really have anything. Now, I start looking myself too, and I don't actually have the rocks anymore. I've realised that I've dropped them in my retreat, and I don't know where my friends are. Now, after about another couple of seconds, the knocking stopped. Then, just as me and my friend make eye contact again, it starts on the other side, on what sounds like all corners of the cabin. This only happens for probably 4 seconds before completely stopping, and now there is pretty much complete silence, or at least for as long as our ears are adjusting. My friend then starts to tear up a bit and I say, "Hey, get a hold of yourself, it's going to be fine." And I realise that there's probably only one way that this is going to stop. I realise that I have to be brave now and just try and fight whatever this thing is or person, because we need to at least sleep or something, because we're never going to get through this. I'm convinced now that nothing's actually going to come inside the cabin, and that makes me feel better, so I tell my friend, "Just cover me," and I quickly start moving things out of the way of the door, and I scream out profanities, getting more and more angry at the situation. I slam the door open and let out a scream with both of my fists raised, and I turn, do a sprint around the cabin, ready to fight whatever this is, but find nothing. My friend's then finally being brave and slowly comes out too and looks around as well, and we can't find anything. In some kind of heroic action, I sprint from cabin to cabin screaming with my fists raised, ready to fight whatever this is, and upon finding absolutely nothing, I then feel my bravest and start sprinting into the woods, and my friend said, "Stop, stop." I don't hear him initially and I scream louder, then the fear kicks in, and I turned and ran like Forrest Gump the opposite way again. It's kind of funny looking back on it now, but it was like somebody flipped a switch and my senses gone on again, back to the flight mode. That was probably the best part of this whole story, is how funny it probably looked to my friend, but I ended up sprinting back to him and saying, "Get inside," and we closed the door and re-barricade it. We agreed that we're going to keep watch just for the next couple of hours, and there's nothing, just silence. There's silence outside and silence between us, as we're not really sure what just happened. Now eventually, I kind of half fell asleep, and I'm woken up by daylight. I then look at my friend and he shakes his head, as do I. Both of us have no idea what happened that night, but we both described to each other what we'd seen, and it was pretty much exactly the same. I tell my friend to write down what happened, and he does, and it matches exactly what I wrote. So I knew it wasn't just one of us imagining things. We'd only brought food. We didn't forage for anything, so I knew we hadn't eaten some kind of psychedelic mushroom or something by accident, but to be honest, that would have given me much more peace. Now, the worst thing about this situation is that we still had to get back out of here, and yeah, it wasn't going to be fun. My friend actually woke up incredibly quick, especially for somebody who's always late to things, and he said that he barely slept too, but he was sure in the night he would hear something. I said, "What did you hear?" And he said, "I don't know, it just sounded like clicking again, but he's not sure whether he dreamt it." I say, "You probably dreamt it because I didn't hear anything," and I quickly go outside and inspect all of the cabins. Now, there's nothing. It's almost just like we'd never been there in the first place. Everything was normal. I inspect the side of the cabin expecting to see some kind of punch holes or something, but there wasn't anything, which is really weird. There was also that weird odour again that I couldn't get out of my nose, and I actually wasn't able to smell anything for a while after this. And my friend, who can barely smell anything as normal, could really smell it strong. We pack up hesitantly and begin to leave. Now, upon the way back, my friend actually does a good job of constantly covering our six and looking behind us. The forest felt much more peaceful than before, which is really weird, almost like the entire atmosphere had changed. It's something that I've never experienced since, even during my work as a ranger, and I still think of this. Now, we ended up getting halfway back in absolute record time, and we have to stop for a water break. Now, as I'm sitting there drinking on my water, I can see a silhouette again, not far off where we are, and I freeze for a moment. It takes a second, but I realise that this one's just a tree, but it showed you the kind of state of mind that I was in at the time. every shadow is becoming a monster now cast by the trees and sunlight, and I don't want to be out here with the monsters any longer. I then revealed to my friend about the weird glowing eyes that I'd seen when I was tired, and he says that's exactly what I've seen too. I then apologised for not telling him sooner and say that I didn't want to worry you, but he says it's fine. Now, even though that our scenery around us was beautiful and peaceful, we felt out of place, almost like a soldier who's just come back from war and hasn't readjusted to anything. So we continue on with the rest of our hike. Neither of us is saying much, we're just ready to fight now. We've actually sharpened some sticks and got some rocks in one of the rucksacks, and we're ready just to put off a fight. And I've actually said that I'm just going to charge this thing, and my friend agrees. Whether he would have actually charged with me or not, I don't know, but I was just sick of this. I've never been so scared before, and I'm pretty sure the only reason half of this stopped was that I scared off this person or thing. We eventually make it to the last part of the hike, and we tent in for one last time. Now, we must have overslept because when we wake up, the sun's up pretty high in the sky, which means we've been out for a while. I wake up and we get our stuff ready and head off again. Now, we're not long off walking out of this forest, and I'm more than relieved. We eventually make it back to safety and back to the car and load up everything. We quickly flick on the radio trying to listen to anything on the news channel, but there's nothing. Nothing at all. I'm almost expecting there to be countless sightings of some crazy person out there in the woods that we're in, but there's nothing. No one's phoned in. Everything's as normal, and the news for the day is that there's no news, which I think's really weird. Now, my friend was really desperate to report in what had happened to us, but I was reluctant. Putting out a crazy claim like that, as it would seem, would really put my job into jeopardy, and I didn't really want to do that. Plus, I don't know, there's certain things that I don't think you can put out there because a lot of people won't believe you, and people aren't going to look at you the same. But we both agreed what we saw was crazy, and I told my friend that I wasn't really going to tell anyone, and my friend said that he was going to do the same. Now, neither of us can make sense of what happened to us that day. I still can't myself, and even now while working as a ranger still, I still get shudders every time there's a shadow tall enough cast by a tree that looks like a silhouette. Now, I really don't want to claim what I saw was supernatural or paranormal, because I don't really believe in those things, but I'm convinced that it could not have been a person. Especially from my job, I would pretty definitively know whether it was or not, but it's just impossible. So that leads me to my next question. What was that thing out there following us for so long? And what would have happened if I didn't get brave suddenly? I'm pretty certain we were safe in those cabins, but I don't know, something was just off about it. I've also forgave my friend for how cowardly he was, but it still annoys me knowing that I was advancing towards this thing and he was just hiding back there. But I'd hate to think what would have happened if we didn't have a tent up, or if we hadn't had a cabin to take shelter in. I also have no idea why those cabins were there in the first place or who previously used them. Some people have claimed that it's been used for witchcraft and things like that before. This is what my friend says, but I don't believe that. And whatever this was far more weird than anything I've ever seen in my life before. I just want to share my story just in case anyone's had anything similar and feels like they're alone in this, because I can tell you, you're not. I haven't met anybody else who's seen anything like this, and I get told, oh, it might have been a Mothman or skinwalkers, but I don't know. Maybe it was just some kind of spirit we disturbed, but I really don't know what to think of it. But yeah, if you have experienced anything like this before, just know that you're not alone in this, and just to be careful out there in the woods. You really don't know what's out there,